about how to service the Moen PosiTemp shower valve, if it be just for the shower or the tub or both. So if we want to put a quantified value on this task.
Hello guys. One of my shower bathtub is leaking, taking apart like let me say probably 2 liter within, I don't know. Maybe it's getting harder, so I need to fix my leak before any of the water down underneath the second floor. Anyway, I'm just learning, watching some few video clip, not watching but listening, so I can fix my shower faucet.
Keep in mind, if you're going to hire a plumber, you're going to give him your address and phone number, whatnot. He's going to come, he's going to do it. He's going to have what he needs to complete the job. He's going to leave, and he's going to guarantee it. What he's going to have is a puller, which is in the neighborhood of $100. He may have OEM handles, which you may or may not need. You don't know until you get the thing pulled apart and put back together. He may have a collar. You may need one, you may not. He may also stock just the button for the handle. You may need one. He will have the cartridge, an OEM cartridge, which you could be $75 to $100. He will have the essential Allen wrenches, as you may. He will have the skill, and regardless of what happens if you hire a professional, hopefully you get a professional job. However, if you're willing to do this yourself, you can. And if you watch this video and have all these tools, you could save some money. It's not always cheaper to do it yourself. You must be prepared. So, can you do it? Yes, you can. And I can help. This is the cartridge we will be using. This is an OEM product, original equipment by the manufacturer. Not a good idea to go with the import versions on this particular project. So let's step in the shower and see if we can keep from getting too wet. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do first. We're going to turn off the water, but in doing so, we're going to make sure that we're prepared to turn the water back on. And what I mean by that, before we start repairing a shower valve, we make sure that we have the PosiTemp puller, we make sure that we have the correct PosiTemp cartridge, the Moen 1222B, we make sure we have the Allen wrench to pull off the handle and all that stuff, so that we pull this cartridge out, we don't damage it, and we put in the new one, and we put the water back on without a problem. If this cartridge comes apart and you don't have the puller, you could have to call a plumber, and it will be pricey. So let me go through the steps of what we're going to do first. We'll turn off the water, and we'll drain it down. Water's off. And because it's off, the water's not flowing right now, so I can get to this screw. Now keep in mind, the lever is in the on position right now. I'm going to take this screw out of here, and I'm going to turn it back to the off position, so that I know it's in the off position, because rotationally, it means something in a few minutes. Then we're going to see the way this turns. Clockwise is off, and this little stop right here is up against that ridge. We're going to take a screwdriver, Phillips it is, and we're going to pull off the handle adapter and set it down exactly like we pull it off, so that we don't forget where this goes. And also, this is a stop limiter, which you can rotate into different positions to have it not get as hot as it could otherwise. It limits the heat, the rotation of the knob. This particular one is in the full hot position, where the limiter is at maximum angle. Now this limiter assembly is not essential for the valve to operate. It's essential for the valve to operate as designed, having the heat limiting function. So if that is in a different position other than straight up, note it and keep them together in that position, and your limitation will be retained at the same temperature. We just pull off this collar and it just slides right out, no screws, no attachments. And inside, under the collar, is the cartridge. Now, this is what we're going to pull out, and it's not going to come out until we pull this clip. This clip comes straight up. This is a very important part of any single-handle Moen cartridge. Here's the clip. It comes out. You set it down. It'll always go in from the top. But here's a part now that you want to be very aware of. And the tool that comes with the cartridge is this little goodie. This little goodie will go on here and it'll rotate this cartridge body. Now, I'm looking right now, and I don't know if you can see it, but it says H and C. That would stand for hot and cold. Now, this valve physically will go in with the H and C on the bottom. If it was in that way, then you need to put the new one back that way, because that's the way the house is piped. If it's on top, then you need to put your new cartridge with that back on top. So now that we've identified which way hot and cold is, we'll see if we get lucky and if this just slides out of here with a pair of pliers. If it doesn't slide out easily, we use a puller. Because you may not want to buy a puller, but once again, if this is a weekend, you should buy one in advance. Now here we have, it's being a little tough, so we'll try using the key tool and we'll try rotating this cartridge, breaking it free from its kind of stuck in place position by rotating it. And as you can see, I'm just going to break this plastic piece. So I'm not going to pull it out with pliers, so it's a good thing I have my puller. You take your, now this is the Magnum, or excuse me, this is the PosiTemp puller, not the other puller. This is the big one. And the other puller will not work on this valve stem. So you stick your cartridge puller on there. This screw goes into the brass inner stem, which hopefully will stay intact with the cartridge as we very carefully pull this cartridge out of the faucet body. And what I mean by carefully is if we don't yank around and force it, we slowly tighten this collar down. It's kind of like a wheel puller. I've got tension on it. I'm feeling that barrel tighten down, and I'm going to try to rotate it a little bit, which is what I was trying to do a minute ago. Okay, I just felt it turn. You can see that it turns. It broke loose. Now it's just going to pull out. Once again, I'm making sure that I knew that H and C were on top. So I'm setting this down, and I'm feeling in here for any debris. And it's natural for water to come out like that because the pipes are just draining down. To be careful, to be sure, I'm going to look in there to make sure I don't see any long sticks or twigs. And there are debris in there. Going to slide right back in there. If it doesn't, and it's really coated in there, you could take a little bit of steel wool, very fine steel wool, very lightly clean it up, or maybe one of those green 3M Scotch-Brite pads. Now I'm going to put the H and C on the top. push it straight in. Now I'm not pushing on this part, I'm pushing on the body. And I'm pushing itself. The clip goes back in. It must go down all the way, or the collar won't go back on. And sometimes you have to play around because this clip, and there it goes, the clip goes through a slot here and a slot here. Now that you've got the clip back in, you can turn the water back on and put it all back together. What I'm going to do is turn the water back on, and before I put the handle on and everything, and make sure that when I turn this on from the position, that cold comes out first, then it blends, and then it goes all the way to hot, and then it turns off, back clockwise to turn it back off to cold. It should always be such that the cold comes out first, and then as you rotate it becomes hot, the valve stops. If you're using the limiter in here, and your limiter is other than straight up with this notch, you could have it so that it'll only turn on and only go up to maybe 90 or 100 degrees or something. That's your temperature choice. If you're not going to have it work as a limiter, you don't even need to have this in there, but it's a good place to store it. So we'll put it in there and we'll turn the water back on and we'll check our polarity and our flow. Now we've got the water turned back on. The cartridge is in the off position, and we're going to find out if that inner stem was in the correct position rotationally. We know the body of the stem is because we put the H&C on top. So what we'll do, we'll turn the cartridge on. I could put the handle on here, but it doesn't look much different. I'm just doing this, and that should be cold first, and then it should get warm, and then it should get hottest right there. I'm checking it to be certain that that is definitely warm, that is definitely cooler, and that is definitely cold, and that is off. And it's not dripping.
Yeah.
Now, if it would have been hot first, then mixed, and then cold, all you would have to do, because you know your outer body is correct, all you would have to do is rotate this stem from the off position 180 degrees, put your limiter back in the position you want it in this case we're straight up, no limit, and you're good to go. And you could, you don't have to turn the water off to rotate that stem. Now all I'm going to do is put the screw back in the handle adapter, which is, I believe, always a Phillips. Now we don't have to go behind this escutcheon, this repair plate here, because there's nothing serviceable behind there. So that's why those screws don't matter. And the owner's manual for this cartridge is in the bag, and the instructions are in there, and it is in writing for you if you forget. We put the handle back on here. Now what I'm not doing is I'm not going to turn this thing upside down so I can get to it easy, because I don't want to get my knees wet. Instead, I'm going to try to run that Allen screw from the bottom. And that Allen screw on these newer Posi-Temps turns quite a bit before that screw drives all the way home. Now, right now I can see that the tub spout isn't dripping. I can see that that's cold mixed and that's hot. It's not dripping. And we have successfully changed a Moen Posi-Temp cartridge.
Boy.
Can you do it? Yes, you can, and I can help.
Yes,
Thanks for
I
watching.
can.
RamonasPlumber.com
Yes, you
and
can.
DIYPlumbingadvice.com.
When I
Thank you.
my shower. Okay, let's see another one.
Hey, it's John at Enduring Charm. I'm standing inside a shower here, and I'm looking at a Moen-style shower valve. Now, I've put many dozens of these in the various bathroom remodels that I've done over the decades, and it's a very good system. I really like it, actually. The inside, the guts of it, the valve, is called a Temp, and it uses a cartridge that can be replaced over time. This particular installation, I think, is about a decade old, and it is starting to drip a little bit. If you look up here at the shower head, you can see there's some deposits there from water, and if I sit here long enough, you'll see an occasional drip come out. And that's because the valve, the cartridge inside the valve, I should say, has started to leak. Now, sitting on top of my camera tripod here is the replacement valve. And these are very easy to come by. You can buy them online. Very often you can buy them at a box store, certainly a plumbing supply store. And it comes as a little kit here. So I'm going to show you how to install this. It's not difficult, but there are a few things you need to be aware of. So the style may look very different. Moen made a lot of different styles, but they're all going to have this plate in the background, which is called an escutcheon. And it's going to be a single handle like this. It may look physically different, but the general idea is the same. And they all use this cartridge in the Temp valve. Now, the very first thing we want to do for this repair is to shut the water off. Now, I have a bunch of videos on how to shut the water off in your house. If you have a well water, if you have city water, it may be different. So you can check out some of those videos, but we want to shut the water off, and then as part of that, we want to drain the water pressure off, because if I just shut the water off and I start to take this apart, there will still be water pressure there. So what I want to do is shut the water off, go to a faucet, say on the downstairs level or somewhere lower if possible, open up that faucet and let the water pressure drain off. Okay, I bled off the water pressure in the system. I'm still going to open this valve now, because if there's any residual water in there, I want it out now and not landing on my head or on the camera. So we're in good shape. Now, as long as I got this handle in this position, I just want to show you something. Underneath here is a little hole, and in order to remove this handle, there's a set screw in that hole. So as long as the handle is like this, I can show you. Okay, I've got my Allen wrench here to loosen this set screw. I know you're going to ask me what size it is, and I hesitate to even give you an answer, because for one thing, I'm not even sure on this particular model, and for another thing, it may vary over the years, so I don't want to say it's one particular size or another. Expect that this may be a little bit tight, because two reasons. One, they put a little Loctite on there on the original installation, which is kind of a little bit of goo you put on there that hardens up and makes it difficult to come loose. They do that on purpose so the set screw doesn't fall out. And also, this is 10 years old, so it's got a lot of deposits here from soap and the water itself. So this may take a little doing to get loose, but there's the set screw. And let's see if the camera catches up with me. I'm not sure if you can see, there's a little bit of blue color right there. That's that Loctite that was there originally, and that just keeps this from coming loose. So I'm going to put this screw aside, and now this handle should be loose on the cartridge shaft, and I should be, actually it's very loose, I should be able to just slide it towards the camera here, and that's what it looks like inside. Again, there's a bunch of deposits in there from over the years. We can clean that up before we put it back in. Most of these installations are going to look very similar to this. Now, before I take this apart any farther, I want to just show you how this works. This black piece of plastic here is what will turn here, and you can see there's a white piece of plastic underneath it. This black piece of plastic has a Phillips screw in the middle here, which we're going to take out shortly. But what I want to show you is that it has a stop. In other words, there's this metal sleeve right here, and you can see that black plastic hits that metal sleeve. That's the stop. That's the end of the travel. Now, if I start to turn this, you can see there's a space here, a gap, and this will continue to turn until I get to the other side, and that's the other stop. So when the valve turns from stop to stop, that's what stops it from going any farther. I'm just going to sneak my Phillips screwdriver, which barely gets in here without hitting the camera. And I'm just going to loosen that Phillips screw. All right, so it's just a Phillips screw. And again, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there is some of that blue Loctite on there. And now we can see this black piece slides right out, okay? And there's the white piece right here. So that's what they look like. Now there's one more piece to this, which is this metal sleeve. Now let me explain how this goes together normally. This escutcheon right here is tied to the valve behind it using these two screws. If possible, we'd like not to remove those screws. We'll leave those alone, and we'll just leave this escutcheon alone. The reason is that escutcheon is probably sealed with silicone, and we don't really want to mess with that seal if we can help it. This metal sleeve, however, will slide out if I just give it a pull, and it's got all sorts of deposits on there, and that will expose this area right here, which is the front of the positemp valve, and this cartridge is what we want to remove. Now, looking at this particular installation, I can see, again, it's going to make a liar out of me. I do need to remove this escutcheon because there's a pin back here that we need to pull up, which will allow this cartridge to come out. At the moment, I can't get physical access to that pin. So in this particular case, I do need to remove the escutcheon, but ordinarily, or maybe half the time, I guess I should say, you do not need to. It really just depends where that valve is positioned front to back relative to the wall. So in this case, I do need to remove these two screws, and we'll take this escutcheon off. What I want to be prepared to do is reseal this when I put it back together, because we don't want water getting behind this escutcheon. Okay, now I can get my fingers behind there, and I think I should be able to get this off. There. One more little piece there. There it is. All right, so I'm just going to carefully peel this off, and we'll see if the gasket comes with it or not. Yeah. All right, so that's the gasket that I was talking about. Actually, that's fine. I can leave that gasket right there. It won't hurt anything. It's kind of funny though, I've never had that happen. So this gasket goes around the edge here. It prevents water from coming down, but there is a little area right here which lets water come out. So that's kind of glued in place from the old silicone, and I could probably just add a little bit of silicone on top of that and we'll be fine. So I'll just leave that right the way it is. All right, I want to give you an extreme close-up here because this is the important part. So this brass housing, I'll call it, is the positemp valve. You can actually see in the back here, let me use my screwdriver to point, you know, there's hot water and cold water coming in, and it mixes in this valve. Right here is the pipe that goes up to the shower head, and this right here is the cartridge that we need to get out. What's holding it in is this little pin right here, I'll call it. We need to slip some needle nose pliers underneath that little area that sticks up and pull that pin straight up. I'll show you what it looks like in a second. All right, so I'll just take my needle nose pliers, stick it under that area right there, and I'll pull this right out. Don't lose this. So now I'll try to get a close-up of this. That's what we're pulling out. So that it's kind of a double-sided pin. That's what keeps the cartridge installed. And finally, we are in a position where we can pull this cartridge out. Now let me show you the new cartridge so you understand what we're doing here. So here's the new cartridge that's included in the kit. You can see there's some rubber areas right here for sealing. There's rubber O-rings. So they also give you this silicone lubricant so that you can lubricate those rubber areas so you don't tear them putting in. And then they also give you this, which is important. This will go over the shaft, and all it does is allow you to put some pliers on the end there, and it's just temporarily installed, and it allows you to kind of wiggle this cartridge so you can pull it out. So I'm going to take this temporary plastic piece. You'll see it fits over the shaft, and it fits in the sides right here, and that just gives you a square area right here. You can use pliers or whatever you want. Just gives you something to grab onto. So the pin is out, and I can take this now. It may take a little bit of force, but kind of wiggle it. the shaft if I need to. And this is really hard with the camera in the way. All right, I finally got that to twist a little bit with this tool, and I think we should be very close to getting it out. I just had to move this camera because it's just, I have to yank it out and the camera's right in front of me, so. There, now I'm starting to get some water. I also don't want to get the camera wet, but it's coming, here I come. Incidentally, if push comes to shove and you just cannot get this out, they do make a puller tool you can buy, which will kind of press in the middle here and pull this whole thing out for you. I'm just using common hand tools here because I wanted to make it easier for everybody. But if you really have trouble and it's just not coming out at all, there is another option. So this is turning into a good example whether I like it or not, and I don't think I do like it. A lot of the cartridge is exposed now. You can see there's the O-ring and a lot of it's almost out, but it's still stuck now. Now I could go get my puller, but I think what's happened at this point is inside here, probably a piece of the rubber or a piece of plastic or something in there has broken off or become dislodged, and that's preventing this from coming any farther. So right now I can push this cartridge all the way back in and I can pull it all the way back out to this point. After that it gets stuck. So my guess is it's going to be a piece of that rubber has peeled off and it's just preventing this from coming any farther. So what do I do now? Well, one thing is I can use more force. I got to be careful though, because I could pull against the pipes behind there and cause a leak. The other thing I can do is kind of give up and just start pulling this out piece by piece. I can use a drill. I can drill out around the plastic and just work my way around there so that pieces come out and eventually I get all of it. Ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as the housing itself remains in good condition. It doesn't matter what you do to this cartridge. You can take it out in little pieces, it doesn't matter. But if I take a drill and I damage the inside of that housing, then I'm kind of screwed. At that point, I have to replace the whole housing. Now that I've decided that I can't really save this using any of the standard methods, I can really try busting it apart, because part of it is exposed, remember. So before I go get the drill, I can try busting some of this apart and see how far I get. Sometimes that's enough if I keep twisting it, and it might actually come out without getting the drill out. So I can bust out pieces like here and just see how much of it. Well, there's a good piece right there.
Oh, why am I sleepy? Because I woke up at 3. Oh, why am I slept?
Okay, I'm almost there. There's just a few more pieces left. This is the problem, though. You see, this little piece of rubber dislodged, and then it got caught. So as you're trying to pull out the cartridge, that little piece of rubber gets caught on the edge here and will not allow the cartridge to come out. So I grabbed this with some needle nose pliers and just pulled. So, you know, it does happen, and you never really know whether this is going to be a 5-minute repair or an hour repair. It just depends on how it goes. All right, I got the last of it out, at least the big pieces, and that's the bottom of it, so I know that's out. Now, I'm going to try to shine a light in here because I really want to show you. I don't know. Yeah, you can see that, right? So there's a little piece of rubber that's stuck in the right-hand side, the cold side. And there's also some little bits of plastic in there. So I have to be real careful now to get those out with needle nose pliers or my fingers or whatever, and make sure there's no debris left in there. And the housing itself, the brass housing, is clean. I didn't destroy it, so we're in good shape. So as long as you break the plastic and the rubber towards the middle, you won't scratch the housing. Here's another look at it. So here's the new cartridge. You can see how that rubber is supposed to be seated. Here's the rubber from the old cartridge, and you can see it's ripped and torn. So what happened was, as I was pulling this cartridge out, just a little bit of the edge popped out, it became dislodged and hooked on the housing. So this is turning out to be a good example of how things can go wrong. So with that out of the way, let's talk about installing the new cartridge. Now, as we already mentioned, this rubber and these rubber O-rings here can be a problem. And as I already mentioned, Moen does give you some silicone lubricant. However, I prefer to use a better quality lubricant of my own So what I'm going to do is coat all these rubber areas with this silicone lubricant, and I may even put some inside the housing as well. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to slide this into the housing, and as I do, I want to make sure everything's lubricated so none of that rubber catches and tears. So we'll do that. And the other thing I want to mention is that there is an up and a down. You see on that plastic, the white plastic area, there's an H and a C. That stands for hot and cold.
Wow.
Now the old valves didn't have this marking, and you could install the valve upside down or 180 degrees, and you would reverse hot and cold, and you'd have to take it apart and reverse it again. But these new ones come with that H and that C. So H is the hot, that's always on the left, and C is the cold, that's always on the right. Okay, I've got everything lubed up, and by the way, these rubber pads here need to be lubricated on both sides. So now I can just carefully push those in by hand. I'll hold the rubber in place, and it goes in fairly easily. The trouble before was those rubber pads had become loose. So you can see here, there's a little tab sticking up and a little tab sticking down, and those go into a slot. I'll give you a close-up in a second. Let me just push this home. All right, so the H and C is up. Now, before you do anything else, got to make sure that pin goes in, because if you don't, then this cartridge could come out when there's water pressure. So we'll get that pin in, make sure everything works good, then we can start putting this back together. All right, so there's my pin. If you do lose this, you can buy them. I'll make sure that's seated. This goes up here, and it should come down. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it should come down along the sides as I press this home. And that should snap in place. All right, so that's snapped in place. Now that cartridge can't come back out. Now, as I said earlier, very often you can leave this escutcheon on, and the only trick is you need to be able to get access for that pin. So as long as you can stick some needle nose pliers or whatever it is in there to get that pin in and out, you can leave that escutcheon alone. So after we have the pin in, we'll put this sleeve on. This sleeve does prevent that pin from coming out, by the way, so it is an important component. So that slides on like that, and that gasket is still in place, so I'm not really worried about that. There are these two long screws, and I just got to put those in and make sure that I connect with the valve in the back. Sometimes you got to play around a little bit. That one went in, and that one went in. Those should be tight, but not too tight. Don't gorilla them. So now we have that. You could put the sleeve in after if you wanted, but I like to put it in before. And now we have these little plastic pieces. Remember, this one goes in like this, fits into that sleeve. Some of these designs, you may have a two-piece plastic design where you can adjust temperature by turning it and installing it into some splines, but in this case it just has that. And then we have this little black piece right here that goes on like that. And when I get my screwdriver, we have another Phillips screw that goes in the center here. I am not adding more Loctite. There's plenty on there, and these really don't come loose. I've never had them come loose. You can see how easy it is to turn this by hand. It just smooth as butter, so that's beautiful. We're just going to go like that, and I'm just going to turn it upside down so it's easier to get the screws started. And because it's plastic, I want to start that by hand. Don't use a power tool for this. So once I get it hand tight, I'll get a good grip on that and make sure. Yeah, that's good. All right. So that works beautifully, much easier than before. Now let me mention one final thought about these larger shower heads, which were popular starting a decade ago and now have gotten really big. This one needs to be taken off. You can see all those deposits there. Those can be cleaned off, and this can get more use out of it once that's cleaned off. What I want to mention, though, is that these heads themselves hold a fair amount of water. So when you turn the water off, you should expect that this will continue to drain out, I don't know, sometimes a minute, sometimes 5 or 6 minutes. It's after that period, let's say after 10 minutes, that it should stop dripping after that. If it continues to drip after that, then the valve is probably at fault. So that's what it looks like all back together. We'll get the water back on and make sure it works, but this usually is, you know, a 10 or 15 minute project. In this case, things went very wrong, and actually that's good. It gave me a chance to show you when things go very wrong, how you can handle it. But that's about the worst case scenario, quite honestly. The only way it could get any worse is if I scratched the inside of the housing, in which case I'd have to solder a new one in. But in most cases, this goes fairly smoothly.
10 minutes. 10 minutes of your work pays it 400.
Our connection to the land is going to show in the development.
The
Aquilini family took the time to really understand who we are as Indigenous people.
Watson Village can educate our future generations.
So, yeah. I'll be turning on my camera when I'm doing my work, so you guys can have more better idea. Wow! Why am I so sleepy? Anyway, I'm almost here. Oh, so bright. La, la, la. Dum 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 dum. Thank you for watching, and talk to you after my work.